Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to the DM Roundtable for February 2022. This is a chance for patrons and I to get together and discuss topics in tabletop RPGs. By sharing our ideas, thoughts, and experiences, we can all become better DMs or GMs. DM Roundtable discussions are open to all patrons at every level of patreon.com/roguewatson. You don't even have to be an active participant. You can jump in here and lurk to your heart's content, and we are glad to have you. This month's topic, as determined by the Patreon poll, is splitting the party. D&D and most tabletop RPGs are team-based adventures. So what happens when the team inevitably splits up to cover different objectives? How do we keep track of everything? And more importantly, how do we keep everyone engaged? Joining me for this month's DM Roundtable, we have Lumpy Spuds.
Hey.
Jordan.
Hey.
Stan.
Greetings.
Marcus.
Hey there.
Hey. And joining us in a bit, I think, will be Scalenia. So, splitting the party is it's a meme a lot of times. Like it's a something you shouldn't do. It's a joke about, we should never split the party because it's when bad things happen. I think the reverse is actually true now that I've actually played years of D&D, where splitting the party is where a lot of my most favorite memorable moments occur. But I do think it is very challenging for the DM because, running a game is already challenging. And suddenly if you have to legitimately split the party where both sides are doing things simultaneously, whether that's, a heist or you're literally in a dungeon crawl going in different directions, or you have to, one person's going to go talk to this person in a town, the other person's going to go, pick vegetables or something, like whatever the tasks may be. Now you're suddenly having to spin multiple plates at once and keep track of it. I think it can be very, very enjoyable for the players for different reasons, but I think the flip side is it can be an extra challenge for the DM. Lumpy, let's start with you. What are your initial opening thoughts on splitting the party when it happens in your games?
I love splitting the party, actually. I know that it's complicated and everything, but I try to make situations for my players to split the party and see what happens. It's just a lot of fun for me.
Actively encourage splitting the party at every opportunity. I respect it. Let's go with Marcus. Marcus, tell me about your splitting the party situations.
Well, you definitely have to plan for it because splitting the party does really mess up the balance if you're running combat. Um, so you definitely have to take into account, hey, if say they're in a city and one guy wants to go chase a rat, what would the consequences of that be? And if it is in your plans, would that ruin them, or have you already planned for it? I think it's best to just keep in mind when you're making the encounters that'd be the way to go to make sure that if the player wants to be split, it's not throwing a complete wrench into your plans.
That's true. There's been some crafting streams where I know the party is going to split, and I specifically think about how to rebalance that encounter. And I've had some pushback on that. A lot of folks in the chat will be like, "Well, don't rebalance it because they made the choice to split up." And yeah, that's true, but also my job as the DM is to constantly shape the world around them. Technically, I'm not, a pre-programmed video game, so I don't have to fuck the players over if they end up going the wrong way. So I think there's right ways and wrong ways of doing that, but it does give you an extra opportunity, which is partly why it's extra challenging for the DM, is because suddenly you realize, and the same thing happens if you're missing players too. You're like, oh, I don't have my full party here, so whatever I think they can normally handle, I suddenly have to recalculate. Stan, your opening thoughts on splitting the party?
As a DM, I try not to tell my players no. So if you want to do something, I'm gonna struggle like crazy to try to make that possible.
Hmm.
So if two people want to go left and two people want to go right, I'm gonna have an interesting evening, but that's what we're gonna try to do. And then another caveat is sometimes it's a great time saver because split the party is you can do a cameo of, say, two players want to have a conversation and it's straight RP.
Yes.
We might do an offside, an entire different session just with them, and then put that back into gameplay next session. So a different style of splitting the party.
Okay, wait, I have a follow-up question about that. What do you mean?
So, using the infamous and famous Critical Role, a lot of times, they're playing 4 or 5 hour games, and you might have a scene where two characters are sitting at the campfire talking backstory stuff while everybody else is just sitting there.
Mm.
And they might go 15 minutes, 20 minutes having this conversation. A lot of us, like in your home game, you play for 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
That isn't going to be fun for anybody.
Yeah.
So what we'll do sometimes is, hey, I want to talk to so and so about this. It's not going to impact this, but it's great character development. Okay, let's table that. We'll do the adventure, have the fights, and all the other stuff. Maybe split the party into 2 places, and then during that week, character A and character B with the DM can have that conversation. And then, so those characters might know a whole bunch of secrets about their backstories. The rest of the table doesn't know.
That's fascinating. To do like a little extra addendum to the session, just because this is a split party situation, but it's a situation where we're only focusing on this particular split. Even though the party maybe not even physically split, they might just be like camping in a campsite, but like the camera lens, if you will, is focused on them for this moment.
Yeah, it's that conversation that happened during second watch at middle of the night.
Yeah.
That everyone else slept through.
Right. That's interesting. That's a really good solution to that too, because that's something that worries me, which we're going to talk about as a DM, is making sure everybody still has hopefully pretty close to even screen time, and that gets both better and worse when the party is split. But let's go, Jordan. Opening thoughts on splitting the party. Jordan, there he is.
So when it comes to splitting the party, I like it a lot. I think it's one of those where it gives people a chance to kind of take things up to an 11 in terms of if you are going to be having a combat encounter. Normally people will be like, I don't really want to deal with a wandering monster or whatever the situation might be. This is the perfect opportunity for if part of the party wants to do one thing and you aren't entirely sure what to do with the rest of the group, take your wandering monster table and take one of those things and throw it at the party wherever they're at. So that way, if you have to roll initiative, you just have both parties and it becomes this scenario of, oh my gosh, we're trapped because somebody activated a door and it locked, and now you have part of the group on this side and the other part of the group on this other side. If one part of the party doesn't win, maybe they get captured and hauled off and thrown in jail. So it creates these scenarios where it suddenly they're not just worried about did we win, it's oh my gosh, we have to get there to save our friends.
Yeah. That's
so
cool.
if it's one of those things where you're like, okay, well, what do? I have initiative on one and something on the other. Like some of the guys said, maybe you have a social encounter on one side, or maybe you have a puzzle and it gives them a couple of turns to react or do something. Just remember that you're going to give maybe a minute and a half to do their 6-second combat.
Mm-hmm.
What is the other person going to get for their minute and a half?
That's part of the challenge of all this, especially if you're both running, if the party splits up and they both hit combat, then I think it's easier to handle that because you can just be like one or two rounds per split, at least while they're split up. But if one side is specifically in combat and the other side is not, they're just sneaking around, they're doing exploration or socializing or something, Then you start getting into some timey-wimey weirdness because, the world for the turn-based combat has slowed way down so that we can have turn-based combat, whereas the other crew is doing something, where it's like, okay, am I moving 30 feet in 6 seconds? Like, that's hauling ass, and it gets really weird to do that. I never even tried to, come up with a strict timeline for that, but it does get a little...
In those types of situations, I just look at it and go, okay, I give you an action, a bonus action, maybe a reaction. So on the other turn, I'll let you move wherever you need to go, and we'll just ignore how the time dilation works in the two scenarios.
Yeah.
But I'll give you the chance to do a perception check and maybe some sort of skill check, like picking a lock or something like that.
What I like the most, and this kind of opens the floor up to everybody, about splitting the party is, normally when you've got a group of players throughout any particular situation, you might have one or two who are going to be extra focused, extra engaged, because it's something they like to do. It's characters they like to interact with. It's, whatever else they've taken the forefront. And then naturally other players might fade to the back while that's going on. But when you split the party, suddenly everybody's, like, you can't have anybody fade to the back all of a sudden, because the lens is focusing on fewer characters at a time, so those characters often have a bigger chance to shine and interact with what's going on, and that's something that I didn't realize before I started playing D&D, and only after we had gone through several split party scenarios that I realized this is actually really great for players, and especially really great for bringing out players who might normally fade into the back during, and it could be a different player each time that's fading in the back because it's whatever, character is currently taking the forefront in that party. But suddenly if you split the party up, it really feels like everybody is now just being more engaged, because if there's only two people involved in one situation, those two are going to talk to each other and they're going to be planning something. And if there's three people having a battle, then those three are going to be talking to each other and planning on some, and how to coordinate and do stuff. So it becomes really rewarding for the players, and then for me as the DM to witness this. I love seeing that happen between the players and seeing that that interactivity. I don't know, that's just an observation, I guess. It's not really a tip or advice or complaint or anything. That's just something I've noticed. And that's partly why we've all said, like, we enjoy I think seeing it and encouraging it, because it actually does do a great job bringing out a lot of players, and kind of just you got fewer players at a time, so you just end up not having as many people fade into the back.
They also have to use skills that they're not used to using. So if you come into this is a situation, parties kind of fall into habits. We run into a door. We have rogue's going to check for traps.
Oh yeah.
And make sure it's unlocked, and then the fighter's going to open it and go in first. You've got your established procedures. All of a sudden, the party split. Hey, where's the bard? We got to go talk to the shopkeeper.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, he's in jail. Oh, geez.
He's in jail.
That means the paladin who doesn't lie has got to, we're in trouble. You have these different situations that can come up because it's a new cast of characters with limited resources. So everybody has to be creative.
That's very true. And that's honestly where a lot of the fun comes from, is when you have to force a character out of their comfort zone, and the character's like, the player says, oh God, I'm going to suck this up, and I've got my -1 modifier, and we're going to roll, and then they roll really good or really poorly, and then it's all cheering around the table for various reasons. You'll love to see it. Has anybody encountered a situation where they specifically were panicked and not looking forward to having the party split? I know we talked about everybody like enjoys seeing it, but what if there was something that really you were like, this is going to be a problem? Really? Because I
thought for sure I had a TPK on my hands.
Oh yeah, that would be a problem, I would think.
It was kind of a Mines of Moria, full of a took kind of situation.
Assuming it's the kind of TPK where you can't come back from, like the players aren't going to be like thrown in jail or something. Like if they're in like a monster den or something, like then getting eaten.
Setting off an alarm in the middle of an orc horde's cavern.
Oh, they're fine.
Yeah. Nothing, and the party's half elves, no problem whatsoever. The party split up in three different ways. It was like the worst room to set off the alarm. and they instead of coming together, they took 3 different entrances. We had 2 characters at each entrance, and I thought
Nice.
for sure I was going to have a TPK.
Because they set off multiple rooms at that point.
They had probably 8 rooms going at one time.
Ooh,
It was
boy.
bad. It was really bad. It came down to one roll of the dice, or characters were going to start dropping, and they made it.
The part
So.
that I was thinking of was in Tomb of Annihilation when I don't even know if I remember the full context of this now. It's like I said, time, distillation, pandemic era has been weird, but there was in the Fane of the Night Serpent, spoilers for our Tomb of Annihilation campaign, Chris's character Mannix was part of the ritual to get transformed into a Yuan Ti, which was a really cool moment that involved all this, neat cinematic stuff happening. And then the next session, it was basically like, okay, now here's what the rest of the party is basically doing while he's doing this. And I thought, okay, this makes sense narratively, but what do I have Chris do meanwhile? Because literally his character's been doing this whole time. And probably if I were to go back and change things, I would have tried to let him still play Mannix in that moment. And I forgot how. For some reason, I had a whole sequence of events for him to do, and for some reason, I had him do those. I think while the party was doing something else, and then the next session, it was just the other party was doing something. They were going on this whole dungeon crawl around the dungeon, while for some reason he was still in that moment. So maybe I messed up the time frame or something, but I should have come up with something more for him to do. But just story-wise, it was an odd moment to split the party, or me and be continuing splitting the party, just because I think the solution I came up with was for him to just control an NPC that the party had at the time, because I was like, look, your character's doing its thing during this time, and the other characters are now going around actually doing their exploration of the entire dungeon.
Yeah, if I remember right, I think that was the tomato soup episode.
yeah, he was trying to he cast a some kind of intelligent spell on himself to pretend that what he was doing wasn't deeply horrific and evil and terrible. But that was a moment where it just felt awkward to split the party, because I don't think I had enough planned for his character. For some reason, everything I had planned already done the previous session, so I just had to let him play an NPC, and that was not a great solution, but that was a weird, unique situation. I was just wondering if anybody else had run into a situation where they had a character that was literally you had nothing for them to do while the other party was doing something. By the way, hello to Scalenia, has joined in. Yeah. Bouncing off that, what are your initial thoughts on splitting the party?
I have done it a couple times. It's probably been the most memorable parts of our parties for the
Hell yeah.
ones that I have larger groups, smaller groups, and when they split up, if it's just one person on his own, just like you were mentioning with Mannix, those don't feel as good from my perspective. It really needs people to bounce off each other, in my opinion.
Yeah. I forgot. I think Kales was with Mannix too, but both of them, for some reason, I just didn't have anything planned for them to do while the entire rest of the crew did something else, because the rest of the crew was going through an entire dungeon, and I had to do all of that. And I guess I just didn't do a good job of having split content for the party to deal with. What did work better was our most recent campaign, which is partly why I threw this on the topic. Spoilers for our Rime of the Frostbane campaign, but the party ended up splitting up about halfway through Sunblight, and actually made sense narratively, where they had 3 different things they needed to go do right after a big battle. And that was a good example of, I had to go through and really look at, okay, do I need to rebalance and change some of these situations, because suddenly we've got 2 and 2 and 1 party member, which the one party member wasn't actually bad, because he was interacting with a shit ton of NPCs and had NPCs with him the whole time, so that actually worked pretty well. And then the other group met NPCs and had a battle, and then the third group was just battling the entire time. And I thought that was a really fun moment in a unique situation, where the party actually split up 3 ways, and it made sense, and they all had very different things to do. And that was a good example of how, no character can fade. If you literally have a 2-person party, no character can fade into the background. There's just always something to do, and it involves everybody. I really enjoyed seeing the party split there, even though it's so much harder for the DM to be able to handle all that. I guess I'm asking for advice on what's the best way to keep track of having the party split, whether it's combat or just RP stuff or whatever else. Does anybody have any kind of just general advice that they do when the party splits up?
Actually, what I like to do a lot of the time is I just like to keep everyone in initiative order the whole time,
So,
like all the parties. So then I can just instantaneously switch between the two groups,
okay.
and that usually helps a lot for me. And I usually have like some other things just off to the side that I can say, "Oh yeah, you found this or that," for anyone that's kind of separated, and I don't have anything prepared specifically for it.
So even if they're not in combat, you would still put them in initiative order just so you can say, okay, now it's this team's turn. And do you put it by team or do you still do it by player?
I still do it by player most of the time, but I have done it by team a couple times with much less success. It just seems to me like that you can kind of get everyone the same amount of time if you just kind of keep in that order. But that just works for me personally.
Yeah, that would help. That would help remind the DM as literally just a reminder tracker to be like, hey, don't forget you've got other people over here, because it gets hard. You can, as a DM, you can become very myopic very quickly, and especially if it's a really cool moment that you're focusing on, and you can spend 10 or 15 minutes just on one group and realize, oh shit, I've been leaving these other folks high and dry doing their thing. And I think if you put them in initiative order, that would probably force you to remember about them, even if you're not dealing with combat.
It also helps them too, because then they'll know, okay, well, we just did that group. Well, if we're continuing to pass the ball around, then I should be expecting something's going to be coming up for me.
Yeah.
So sometimes it gives them a chance to kind of, even in small groups, if the party's split, I'm more willing to let people talk at the table a little bit, just so that when their turn comes up, they're ready to go ahead and take their turn, kind of like how you would do in regular combat.
In combat, and this came up in the crafting streams, do you put everyone into the same initiative order and jump around and literally follow the initiative like gospel and jump around between different situations? Or do you say, okay, for team A, here's your initiative, we're going to go through a round or two, and then team B, here's your initiative, we're going to go through a round or two? For anybody that's run split combat.
I do the first one, of course, but I have, as I said, I tried the second one. The first one just it works better for me because it just kind of keeps everything going in the same flow.
I think I did the second one. For some reason, Rhyme is the one I remember specifically about having multiple people, multiple split parties being involved in multiple split combats, and that's actually pretty rare. I think. I'm trying to remember times the party split up. And in that situation, because I use a mod in Roll20 that lets me roll individual initiatives for each individual monster, it actually wasn't that hard to keep everybody in the same initiative, but I still focused on, hey, here's the round between these, and here's the round between that. It just felt like it would have been too tedious to jump around, but maybe that would have been more organic and been like, okay, and now this group, you have to deal with this guy attacking. Okay, now back here, now you get to go attack. I guess it would have been interesting to try both and see which one makes more sense, but I opted for the latter, and I felt like it worked well, but I don't think that would have worked at all had I been using the old school all monster groups of the same type have to roll the same initiative. I've really liked using that variant. Any other general advice on splitting the party and keeping players engaged and just having the DM keep track of everything?
Well, if I could, I'd like to toss out a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So
This is the place for it.
so I had a situation some time ago where one of the characters they found one of those tomes of knowledge where read the book and you get a bump to one of your stats, and that takes hours for them to do. And so they're an elf, so they're going to say everything but 4 hours a day. I'm reading my book because I need this bump stat because I want a multi-class. It's like, all right. Well, meanwhile, the world keeps spinning. Other people keep doing stuff. What do you do to try to keep that person engaged
Yeah.
while Team Scooby-Doo is over here solving a murder mystery?
How long does it take? What's the actual rule?
Oh, I'd have to look up what that magic item is, but it's something like 24 hours or something like that.
Okay.
So they were burning like 20 hours of one day trying to get,
To
trying to
get
get
done as
as
soon as
much of this
possible.
they could done. Yeah.
Oh, that's tricky.
Has
Well,
anyone
yeah.
ever tried using interactables on your landing screen, like different things that your players can interact with on the screen itself? Moving around some tokens, maybe have some multi-sided tokens that they can kind of flip through. I've used that to give clues to my players for my adventures.
Yeah, that's a cool idea. I've not messed with that at all. I would gently discourage a character from spending hours and hours reading a book. I'd be like, do you want to be part of this adventuring party still? Unless the rest of the party wanted to specifically take downtime. Your options are you could have the player, you could be like, all right, literally you can spend a day doing that, but the rest of the party is going to do a thing. And if we have an NPC at the ready, or we have somebody like you can literally control a different character while your other character is doing this, then that could be an option. Certainly not an ideal one, but like I've had player characters control NPCs while their characters are doing other things, and it's okay, I think, in the end, as long as obviously the player's okay with that. Or I would say, you know what, instead of doing that, just spend maybe I would say during a long rest, maybe a short rest and a long rest, you can roll an intelligence check. And if you roll a certain amount, then you've speed read that much of the book, and we've accelerated this process. Turn it into players like rolling fucking dice. It's a dice game. So let's turn it into a fucking skill check. And you don't lose anything. It's not a question of like, oh, you failed to do that. You just lose the time. So it just is a way for you to speed through that process. So those are all my quick brainstorming ideas.
Maybe with that tome of knowledge, you actually give them a legit puzzle, and that one player works on that
I think that's
puzzle.
what Lumpy was saying, yeah.
So that they're not just actively like sitting there, but maybe it's something where it's a brain teaser, or it's some sort of maybe not interactables. Like interactables, I think is a really good idea, but having some sort of story problem or have it get connected to their backstory, have something. You're definitely going to need to have something in your back pocket to pull out for it.
But does that solve the problem of only this character is doing this thing? Okay, now everybody else is still doing things. Like, yeah, the character can be, messing with a puzzle, but are they just messing with that puzzle while the rest of the party goes off on this, adventure or continues about their day?
Well, I'll give you an example. For this might not have been a tome of knowledge, but in our Rime of the Frost Maiden, I was playing with my brother and a couple of the other people that use your server, Marcus and Mark and a few others. And my brother's character got kidnapped by an Oni and was then a prisoner for a hag. And the hag started to torture his character. So you have one player that's often who knows where, because the Oni can fly, because that's one of the things that Onis can do. Spoiler. But that being the case, you have one character in the party that's often who knows where. Well, everybody else is trying to figure out, where did he go? What happened? Oh my gosh, where did he? You had him. You put him over here to take a long rest. Where did he go? So the rest of the party is freaking out. But he had to do something And so I would have these interactions where it was almost like I got to showcase what the small villain with a little v was doing, because they would have interactions with him particularly. And it would give him a chance to kind of see, oh my gosh, this is what's like the interactions between him and those NPCs that normally don't exist because they're not in the immediate vicinity of the
Right.
players.
Yeah.
Suddenly got a chance to do things, which for him made it feel like he had his own little adventure.
Okay.
So he still got to do things, but in this Tome of Knowledge sort of situation, maybe you tie the tome to processing as he's reading through the tome things in his backstory. As he's reading this book, he kind of daydreams a little bit. And as he daydreams, he now has to process, how did he get here? What's going on with his group? All these different things. And you kind of bring him through sort of like a dream scenario where he's just daydreaming. And you create opportunities for him to role play. And then you jump back to the rest of the party.
I like that. And yeah, you could make it role play. You could throw some skill checks in there, make this whole little kind of theater of the mind narrative event just by navigating and understanding this tome suddenly becomes its own little mini adventure that's a split party situation.
Right.
Okay. I like the idea of being captured by enemies for the sole purpose of showcasing your enemies, because that is something I mentioned early on in the Tomb campaign, is that in D&D, unlike movies, the camera never leaves the heroes, the players. And normally in most, at least action-adventure movies, the camera often will go to the villains and see what are the villains doing. It's Saruman making orcs and all that, and there's no heroes there. So, but the players would never see that. They don't see there until they fucking show up. So that's a good solution. A tricky one to kidnap players. That might be a whole nother topic. But
well, your example there is perfect, because Gandalf got captured as the captured PC in the party, and he's right there looking at everything that's Saruman.
That's true. Yeah. That's true.
I think it's really tough. You also have to have buy-in from the player. So when the players decided that that's what they're going to spend their time doing, they've kind of made that decision. Like like Eric was mentioning, you have to nudge them sometimes and make the recommendation, this is kind of your thing. Because I think the idea to create the mini dream sequence adventure thing is great, but I don't know if everybody can come up with stuff on the fly. Exactly.
Oh, I definitely couldn't come up with that on the fly. No, that would have to be
Right?
like, here's what I do, and I'm like, all right, we'll plan this for next session.
Right. So that would be super hard. But I mean, in general, I think, if the players understand what they're doing, it's kind of up to them. I recall the situation that I split up was like a snowball effect. I had players that couldn't make it, so I had them do something. And then it just kept getting worse. We're trying to tie the knots together again. Made it really difficult. So when we finally got to the point that a group needed to pick another player up again, they split up. And there was enough action in each one that the moment something dramatic was about to happen or to wait for the outcome, I would jump to that other group. Then they would start, and it was like their own mini movies where you would have a slow build into a climax, and then I'd jump to the other one again before it would be resolved. And that way it would be enough time that one group, if they had to make a decision, would be able to kind of talk about that quietly, make the decision, and then they'd be in the building action of the next story. And I felt like that worked really well. But if somebody just said,
that's the ideal.
this is what I want to spend my time doing as my character, it's kind of their choice, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, all these things definitely require that buy-in. Anything else about splitting the party? It's kind of a, usually with these topics, I can crack open the Dungeon Master's Guide and read the official advice or a paragraph or pages or whatever it is. And there's actually nothing from what I skimmed through it earlier today, that specifically says, here's what happens if your party splits up. And I think it would be helpful if they included something in there about that, like how, making sure you give equal screen time to everybody, even if the things seemingly have different weight. Like one team is in a really desperate combat and the other team is picking herbs for reasons. I think you still need to showcase those different things, and hopefully you can find a way to meld them together and make them all fun. One of the most enjoyable splitting party moments I had ever was also in Tomb, where I don't even know why the party split up like this. It was just seemingly random. It was not something we had planned or anything. And one side, half the party went to, I think they were escorting zombies, like a Pied Piper situation, out of an area, and then the other half was going to go sneak into that area. This was in Omu and Tomb. And then I had the
Mannix and the mushrooms, right?
And it was the Mannix and the mushrooms. Yeah, I know. That fucking killed me. God, I don't think I've ever laughed so hard in a D&D game in my life.
It almost killed Mannix.
It did almost kill me. Because that was...
That is one of the funniest moments ever.
Yeah, and it, completely unscripted. None of that. I mean, it was... And that's why it was so funny. But yeah, I had those Vegapygmies come back and I was like, you know what? These are a fun, really shitty, crappy minion that can just fight this split party, and it would be over in a second. And all of a sudden, it wasn't over in a second, and all the bad things happened. Theron turned into a Allosaurus who went berserk and just started eating everybody. Mayonnaise got poisoned, had to run away, and then the other group did their thing relatively easy. It wasn't a big thing, but when they all met and just talked about it, it was just fucking hysterical when they actually set up this situation that you had to have 5 things explain how we got to this point, and that was so incredible. And it was just a randomly it was just a mini split party situation. They were barely even split up for very long. And it was so fucking funny the way that panned out. And I think that one especially made me solidify, okay, splitting the party can be a really great idea, actually. Just for these really random moments. That wasn't even a case of necessarily every player being showcased, but it ended up being super enjoyable. Does anybody have any good war stories for split parties? I think we've mentioned a couple already.
I kept one of my players stuck in ethereal form for three sessions in a row, so he was kind of separated from the party, and I got them back together by having them fight a group of phase spiders.
That is a unique situation. One character's like a ghost for a couple of sessions.
And he had a ton of fun with it too, because he had the telepathic feat, so he was going around trying to communicate with certain people. It was just fantastic.
I feel like the right kind of player, and as long as they communicate how this works, could have a lot of fun with that. But that, yeah, again, that requires some buy-in by the player to be able to enjoy that and work with it.
I had a group where it was a homebrew situation, and they went underground into a cavern, and it was one side, the party showed up early, and so they went in one direction, and then it caved in, and so the other party had to find a different way in. And so one side was facing a bunch of Kruthic, which essentially are Zerg from StarCraft.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, you had a bunch of ones that are messing with kobolds, but there was a huge ravine, so they were crossing a bridge over a chasm, and the kobolds were using these flying mounts. I think they were bats or something. And so people were falling off the bridge, jumping on the back of bats, and the other ones were dealing with traps laid by kobolds and dealing with Kruthic, and nobody died, but had all these epic situations where somebody failed roll and they're gone.
Wow.
And by the time they were done, everybody was talking about it the next time we all hung out and were grabbing drinks. And people were looking at us across the bar going, what the heck are they talking about?
It's the best war stories.
I had a situation that I think it falls under this category, but it went south on me a little bit. It was in Tomb of Annihilation. It was a group of 4 people, and it was a situation where they were in the Fane of the Night Serpent, and one of the guys basically, through a series of events, was apologizing for the death of an NPC to the Fane, and ended up going through the transformation that Mannix went through. When the whole situation came up and the guy had decided that he was gonna, just pay his dues or whatever. Instead of running the game at the same time, I tried a one-on-one session. And that one-on-one session was the most intimidating, difficult things that I had done up to that point. And like in retrospect, I'm not satisfied with the way that it worked. The player was fine with it. He was cool.
Yeah.
But like instead of splitting the party at that time, I tried a one-on-one session. So I know that's kind of the same and kind of not the same, but I
Well, no,
personally
that's a
wouldn't recommend that for anybody.
that's a good topic. Yeah, I think it was Stan mentioned it earlier about having an aside of like a scene that happens between two characters, and you say, "Hey, we're gonna, we'll do this scene with privately later," which is basically exactly what you're talking about. So when this came up, in this moment, did you specifically say, "Okay, we're gonna stop your character's progression right here, and we'll do a one-on-one later"?
Yep, sure did.
Okay, and then just focus on everybody else for the session for the rest of it?
It was toward the end of that session anyway,
Okay.
so it worked out well where, timing wise. But what made it difficult was getting him back into the next session because of the time dilation between the two things.
Yeah. What was the reason for doing that? You just thought like this is the best way to handle it right now because he's just alone. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. And I think I've been watching a couple things on, how cool a one-on-one session could be and and I was just like, okay, let's stretch these muscles. And I did not enjoy it personally.
Interesting. Just I kind of want to do some follow-ups about it, but I don't know how specific you want to get about why it wasn't enjoyable, but
yeah.
That could be a good topic.
Yeah, it depends on how much you want to share, but
yeah, you're welcome to ask any questions. But if you wanted to stay on this topic or make it a different topic,
I mean, I think
yeah,
this counts as a split party situation. You're literally splitting the party. In this case, it was the character's obviously done a thing that they're going to do, and you as the DM basically made the choice to say, okay, we're going to hard split the party at this moment and continue on with other characters, and then you're going to be set aside for a moment. And we're just going to focus on you. And that's partly what the topic is about, is like, how do you, get all the players engaged? Well, one way you can do that, which it sounds like it didn't work for you, was to literally take that player or, any groups of player and say, okay, we're going to table this for later, and we're just going to run with this other group for now. Or I guess in your case, you said, so did you have a special extra, I don't know how often you do this group, but did you just meet regularly with that one character next time, or did you try to squeeze in an extra session and then still go back to the rest of the group for the next time? What is the time?
Squeezed in an extra session. Yeah,
okay.
Squeezed in an extra session on a different day that was good for both of us.
Gotcha.
It was partially because I didn't want to run a lot of Fane of the Night Serpent, but I knew that player in particular was very interested in it, and I didn't want them to miss out the chance.
There's your problem. If the DM's not excited about something, you're already coming in with a disadvantage.
that was probably a little bit of it. It was just intimidating, and I didn't know how to run the social side of it because most of it had been exploration up to that point, and I felt like that was nailed down pretty well. A little bit of information gathering. We had the conversation of them becoming the Yuan-Ti through the ritual as an option or solution. Long story short, they had Salida with them. He had cast a spell that ended up killing Salida. Salida hadn't shown herself as a mole yet. So they all thought, for their purposes, basically, that she was a good character. Anyway, I don't remember the exact events on how they found out that there was that was her home or whatever the case may be. But to give him the opportunity to do it, we tried the one-on-one session, and I felt like it was a way that I could showcase the thing and honestly just give it a shot. The reason I would say I didn't care for it so much was just because of how intimidating it is. Usually there can be downtime, or there can be moments that when other players are talking or role playing or making decisions, I can be looking something else up. But during the moments that he's waiting on me to come up with the next thing or for something, I don't know. There's no
crosstalk because it's
breaks.
literally just you and the other person. Yeah, I get that. I've never done that, but that makes sense.
I absolutely love it. I love one-on-one or two-on-one D&D. Some of the best times ever. Absolutely love it.
But hopefully these were areas where you engaged with wanting to do the content also. I would assume.
I've had people, like new players, or there's one time at work where we're stuck here for like 7 hours with nothing to do. So I grabbed my team lead and we ran a session of D&D for 6 hours, just me and him. Had a blast. He'd
Wow.
never played before, and that was his introduction, was one-on-one D&D.
Good Lord. That is, you need to give some advice on that. God.
I will take it, please.
Yeah, I'm not
Love
sure.
to listen to it. Yeah.
I'm not sure I could do that. I don't. I guess it depends on the person, I guess. Yeah. What's your advice, Dan? What's your succinctly describe all of your skills as a one-on-one DM?
It would part of it comes down to character creation. If you know the characters, the player's interest, like I sat down and I helped him roll up a character. He literally never done this before. It's something he heard about, wanted to do it, and he came up with some pretty interesting creative things. So it's like, all right, I have a robust. I use Forgotten Realms, but it's homebrewed, and so I know that world really, really well.
Homebrewed Forgotten Realms? Stop. I've never heard of this.
No, never customize. Loot, pillage to your heart's content.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know that area really well, and I have multiple campaigns going in this world. So, all right, I've got an assassination attempt. I need some poison delivered to kill a baron. Guess what? You're going to be my courier. And so he make him a caravan guard. He's in charge of caravan security, and one of his he has someone. Hey, for 50 gold, you're a first level character. This is like a king's ransom.
Mm-hmm.
For 50 gold, don't open the box. Take it to the city. With his background, oh yeah, I'm in.
Mm.
And then I ran one of the Adventure League modules. So I did my homebrew stuff to set the stage. Then I ran Drums in the Marsh. It's an Adventures League. It's about some lizard folk that come and attack a village, kidnap a bunch of people, and they get there and everyone's upset when they roll into town. Hey, lizard folk stole everybody in the middle of the night. Guess we have to go save the tavern keep, otherwise we don't get booze. So everyone goes into the swamp, and I just ran the module and then finished it when they were heroes, and he makes the drop in Phandalin to assassinate the new Baron. But
Was that all one campaign with just one player?
That took me about 6 hours. And so it took about a 3-hour Adventure League module. I rolled up 3 NPCs for him to control in combat.
I was gonna say.
So I gave him I had a bunch of pre-gens, like 8 pre-gens. Hire your 3 other caravan guards. This is going to be your party. I role played their personality. He handled them in combat. Okay. And so.
Well, so that solves that downtime problem, right? Because he's trying to figure out what the hell's going on those character sheets. So.
A little bit, yeah.
Now, also, I think I just had a thought. Well, this is a separate topic. I'll write it in Discord, sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
The idea of a one-on-one thing, since I got on that topic, you said you started campaigns that way? Or was that just the one session that ended up?
That was just the one session for him. Okay. For campaigns, I've done kind of almost like you're doing a play test where you may have backstory. So I've done short little adventures teaching people how to play for rookies.
Right.
I've taught a lot of people how to play D&D. So I'll do a short little adventure like a combat or something like that, teach them the mechanics, and it adds to their backstory. So the first time the party encounters orcs and they go, oh, I've killed one of these guys before. And everybody looks at them like, what? You go, yeah. And there's something to talk about because the other party's never seen them before. So little things like that.
And that's what I was going to say, was that starting a campaign with one-on-one sessions and then bringing everybody together, that would be kind of cool too.
Yeah.
But like a different version of splitting the party. It was by starting with a split party.
Yeah, that is going to be probably a separate topic, which is how to start a campaign, because I do think there's a lot of really cool, interesting ways to do that, and some of us have had more chances to do that than others, for sure. I've only had a handful that I can do, that I've done before. All right, well, to bring it on home, let's start giving our closing thoughts on splitting the party. Marcus, sir, you have been extremely quiet. Please give me your closing thoughts. You're still with us on Splitting the party and any advice?
I think it can work. You just have to play it by ear, and you have to play it right.
Well said. Let's go bottom to top. Stan, closing thoughts on splitting the party.
I don't like to tell my players no. If they want to split the party, they can split the party, but I also tell them the actions have consequences. I'm one of the guys telling Eric not to rebalance his encounters.
Yeah. which is it's a fair point. It's a fair point. Scalenia, closing thoughts on splitting the party.
Absolutely. I've enjoyed it every time that I've done it, except once. So
except the one time. Jordan, closing thoughts.
I'm with Stan. If you need to kill a character because they make a stupid decision, then stuff happens. But not everything has to be fatal. You can throw them in prison. You can make people do social encounters. There's more than one way to do an encounter, and it doesn't always have to be combat. But giving everybody their turn is necessary beyond belief.
I did kill a character because they split the party last time in my campaign.
Guilty conscience.
Lumpy,
one of us.
I know, yeah. I've broken my cherry on that. Lumpy Spuds, closing thoughts on splitting the party.
It's a lot of fun, and the only way you're going to get good at it is by practicing. So split the party as often as you can.
Yeah, I pretty much echo what's being said, which is don't believe the jokey memes and stuff about, oh, never split the party. It's honestly a blast. It's really fun. It's the times when the party has a lot of fun because, as we've mentioned, characters have to do things they might not be comfortable with because suddenly they have less in their toolkits. And it allows those players to have more focus on themselves because that camera has gotten tighter and you can't really fade into the background like you can in bigger parties. And just the amount of, different simultaneous things you can do and the plans and the heist situations, all that can lead to really fun situations. That being said, it is a little bit more work for a DM, so it can be something that can be intimidating, especially for a newer DM, because it's, I think, tricky enough just to handle a game at first, let alone trying to handle multiple things happening. So probably wait a little bit until you're a little bit more comfortable with the basic premise of running a game before the party tries to split. But I would never necessarily discourage it. And I said actions have consequences. Let them hang themselves if they can. But I would also always make sure it's always in the best interest of the story and the players, ultimately. All right, I think that will do it for this month's DM Roundtable. Thank you so much to Lumpy Spuds, Jordan, Stan, Marcus, and Scalenia for joining me this month. And to all the patrons, shout out to Platinum patrons, Joe, Will, Tiny Dancer, Christopher, Thomas, Adam, Stan, Nathan, Alex, William, I'm Loud, Al, Kyle, Scalenia, Genocider, and James. And gold patrons, RPG Papercrafts, Pretty Boy, and Yuma, Marcus, Dead Lizard Lounge, Sam, Lumpy Spuds, Jerome, Blood, Angel, Veronis, Nathan, Fast Like a Tortoise, and James. Thank you all very much for your support, and hope to see you all again for next month's DM Roundtable discussion.
Thanks so much.
Bye.